and joining us in Kerrang's London HQ. I'm Sam, I'm the editor of Kerrang, and you're joining us for In Conversation with Mr. DUFF MCKAGAN. How are we today?
A little jet lagged. Yeah. Yes.
Fly in today?
Flew in today.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. We'll go easy on you.
Yeah,
it's all
yeah.
good.
Be gentle on me. No quick movements, anyone?
So, Duff, thanks for joining us. We're obviously here to talk about your new record, Tenderness, out on May the 31st. Your first solo record since 1993? Believe in me?
I mean, I guess it is. Somebody mentioned that to me. It's your first solo record since Believe in Me. And although I made a record in '97 called Beautiful Disease on Geffen, it was slated to come out. Like the artwork was done. I'd done all the press interviews and everything. Gigs were booked. Then Geffen got bought. It was called Black Friday or something when all these record companies got bought. So my record got shelved. So kind of in place of that is when I started Loaded. So that became a de facto sort of arm of, I guess, what would be the Believe in Me band, really. So I not that the Loaded records were solo records, but I've made these records that are in that vein of where I would probably continue from Believe in Me. This record is a complete departure from all of that, however.
Yeah, it's a real shift. And I just wanted to talk to you kind of about the journey that you went on to write and make the record, because it was a number of years in the making while you were touring the world with Guns. And a lot of it is kind of built from those experiences of what you saw in the world during that time.
Yeah, so I don't know if some of you here. I don't know how you guys got here, or what your connection to me is. If it's Guns N' Roses, kick ass. If you've read any, I've written a couple books. I used to write a column for the Seattle Weekly for 5 years, and if you've read my columns or read my books or like heard me talk any place, you know I read a lot of history books and try to keep myself really informed, not just currently, but what's gone on the last 600 years, sometimes 2,000 years. And I read so much history, it's not an obsession. It's just, I guess it's my hobby. And you read enough history, you see these cycles happening. And you see something happen currently that has happened before, and the same mistake is being made again. That could be in the United States, in Britain, in South America. And I travel so much, and I'm very interested in people and the places I go to. London, I read the history of London. It's this book that's this thick, and it goes back to pre-Roman, invasion time. And my point to all of this is traveling the world at this time that Guns did this 2.5-year tour. I got into such a good place mentally because our band got back together, and we had these really deep conversations that really healed some stuff from the past. So we go out on this tour, and musically we're kicking fucking ass. We're playing these songs that built our career, built us all. And these audiences that are coming and taking part in this sort of celebration. We played London 2 nights at the London Stadium, big fucking audiences, and that's happening around the world. And you're seeing at the same time these inarguably really interesting historical, political things that are going around the world at the same time. Probably in our lifetimes the most interesting time in our history, right? And not to like point fingers at anybody politically. It's just a very interesting fucking time. And I read a lot of history, so I'm here to attest it is very interesting. I saw a lot of finger pointing. I've seen enough cable news and people screaming at each other on Twitter, and I at one point just turned it all off, and started reflecting on how can I be of service here? How can I show my daughters what did you do during this time? They're gonna ask me, Dad, what do you, and the look in their eyes sometimes, what are you gonna do about this, Dad? So instead of being, I started to write a third book of just observations and of a traveling guy, and observations of a guy who's read history, not a guy who's right, but let's discover this together, and what's some solutions, what's some healing things we can do. And I travel always with an acoustic guitar, always have. On this, I was reading one of my passages in the rare moment that I was in my hotel room, because I'm always out just seeing things and talking to people when I tour. My manager, Brian's here. He will attest for that. It's always like, I'm a tourist, man.
The man that has to organize getting you around all of these tourists.
Well, sort of, he just knows, like, oh, fuck, Duff's he's gonna go out someplace today, But I take side trips also, like if I'm on a bus and there's 2 days off, I'll go some complete other place. And I did that a lot in the States, all over Europe. I took side trips. So this album, these topics were topics I'd written out. And one day in my hotel room, I was playing an E major chord on my guitar. I just had it in my lap. That's my go-to chord. I always just play first, I think maybe everybody does that, or a G. And it's not too late. So I was playing the E major chord, and everybody's lying. I need some truth. Came out, and that's when the idea for making that record I wanted to make for a long time, that really restrained musical record, restrained instrumental record, like Mark Lanigan's first 2 records, Johnny Thunder's So Alone, or Que Sera Sera, or Greg Dooley, things. I always wanted to make a record like this, and I thought, with these topics, now is the perfect time.
Did you have any reservations about writing about those topics in your music for the first time?
I mean, I have experience in opioid addiction. I have experience in depression. I have experience in the things that I wrote about. I know the machinations. I can see them like they're in broad daylight. Like it's so obvious of political movements, and the brazen bullshit that's behind it, that I wasn't afraid to write about it. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but it's about more solutions. Like, it's always going to be about us, and rock and roll's always been about fuck the man. And I played in punk rock bands, and we knew then. I was like 16 years old. We knew the man in the United States wasn't the president, was the lobbyist, all the big machine behind it. And it still is. And but we as a group of human beings, we're just like we're the ones who have to live with the consequences and pay the taxes and do the stuff. And we have a voice, and together we can do things to make this world a better place. And I fucking witnessed it at all these gigs, all the gigs. I mean, even fucking, from Loaded shows to Velvet Revolver shows to Walking Paper shows, I get to talk to people and meet people and see how music brings like this community together. And we don't talk about, the red or the blue or Brexit or whatever's going on. So I'm not afraid to talk about it. Am I going to get less followers on social media or something? Do I give a fuck about that? No.
I mean, thematically, it is that there is a weight to it and a certain darkness to it. But do you also feel that there's light in that conversation as well?
Yeah, I start the record off. Hopefully, the intention was with a modicum of hope in the song "Tenderness," and I end the record with, I think, a larger dose of hope with "Don't Look Behind You." There is a story in between. It is a concept record of sorts. But I hopefully, especially with the nonprofits that we're doing along with this record, which is a whole nother thing, getting people involved with homelessness and suicide prevention and depression and opioid addiction, and just so it brings humanness to these topics and understanding. I forget what the question was. Sorry.
The song "Feel" I wanted to bring up in particular, and no one here has yet heard
Yeah,
the
do
record.
you guys
so-
know any? Have you heard any of the songs? You've heard some of it? Right. Okay. You kind of know what we're talking about, right? All right.
So, yeah, so I wanted to talk about "Feel," which was written in the wake of the world losing Chris Cornell and everything that's happened over the past few years. Do you think that enough is being done to kind of improve the discourse surrounding the discussion of mental health, or even to actually go out there and help people who are dealing with these problems?
Do I think enough is being done? I think people are more aware. I think in the rock and roll community, people are definitely much more aware of it than maybe in the larger community. I think rock and roll community's always been much more, I don't know, sensitive to these types of things, and also they'll gather around and get involved. I've always felt that. Feel was written. I wrote a song. It's called Feel. It's on the record, which will be out in May. And I was still struggling with the loss of Scott Weiland. Didn't know where to place that in my fucking life. And in my 20s, I lost a lot of friends to overdose, and been through some shit myself. And like the friends that are my age that are still standing are the ones who've gotten through it and gotten sober, to be quite honest with you. I'm not trying to have an AA meeting here, but you know, it's just the truth. Like Jerry and Sean from Alice in Chains and me and Slash and in a room together, it's pretty powerful because there's people that aren't in the room because they're dead. So with Scott, I didn't know where to put that in my life because he and I had been through so much, getting him sober and the Velvet Revolver happening and him getting his family back. And it was really so great to watch happen. And then seeing him fall off again, and you knew which way that was, the end of that's only going to be what happened to him. And went to 2 different services for him, and that kind of just sat there. The guns thing started up, and Chris, who I'd just done like the Mad Season thing in Seattle with just months before, and our 2 daughters, May and his daughter Lily, are born 2 weeks apart, and so our wives were pregnant together. Have a history with him. They had babies, you know, they had babies at our houses together. And then Prince died like 2 weeks later, whatever it was. And he's been a huge influence in my life. And Chester dying, and we're friends with Talinda and the kids and Chester. And all these things just culminated in this kind of poem I wrote about it. And it became the song Feel. And I don't mention any of these people's names at all in the song. Do I think enough's being done? I don't know. All we could do is, you know, I'm trying to do my little part in it right now, and we're going to try to hook fans up with a good, vetted nonprofit that they can get involved with. That doesn't mean fucking send money. It just means get involved and become aware and see signs in your friends. And depression is a real thing. It happened to me out of nowhere at 50 years old. At like, for no reason, highlight my, you know, everything else was fine. I was in a movie theater with my wife watching a movie, and I thought there was an earthquake because I thought my seat had sunk 3 feet down, like I jolted. And I looked over to look up at my wife because I thought my seat had sunk down 3 feet, and she was right next to me. And I was shaking, and this sense of moroseness came over me, and I couldn't breathe. And you cannot. This went on. She got me out of the theater, but I sought medical help for this immediately, and it was depression. And I've always suffered panic attacks since I was 16, and they always said to me that this is a side effect of depression. And I always thought they were crazy because I never suffered depression. I'm actually quite the opposite. But depression doesn't mean you're cheery or not cheery. In my case, it was a chemical imbalance. And I can understand if that was untreated, that the condition I was in, you cannot live like that. You know, I couldn't tie my fucking shoes. I couldn't drive. This is me, you know, who can fly here from LA today and do a bunch of press and come here and talk to you guys without a problem, you know, and be happy about it and be happy that you guys are here and feel the power of that. I'm otherwise, you know, a pretty logical fucking guy. It's not about and upbeat. So it's not about I learned. It's not about how you are, genial or not. In my case, it was a chemical thing, and so with Chester and Chris, you know, if it was depression, I do understand. I mean, I'm not. How do you put this? I've said this out loud. It's not like it's like okay to commit suicide, but there is signs, man. My wife was right next to me when it happened to me. Thank God. You know, if I was by myself, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know how I would have got out of the theater, how I would have got home, what I would have done in between, you know, because the light went out. It went completely out. And maybe some of you here know something what I'm talking about, and chances are they do. And I understand there's different extremities of depression, but it's a real thing. And again, man, just like I was just super fortunate I was next to my wife, and she called my best friend, and he came, and then we got medical help. So not to be all downer here about this whole thing, but it was time for me to do a record where I was talking about some real shit that we can all kind of relate to, I think, and try to together like make some shit better, and we're gonna be okay. The overall arc of the record is that we're gonna be okay through all this stuff, and it's chaotic out there, man, but it's really not that chaotic. Like when we get in a room like this together, I see, you know, faces out there that assure me that things are going to be okay.
I want to talk to you briefly about Shooter Jennings, who you made the record with.
Shooter,
yeah, who seemed so important to this record. What's your history with Shooter?
Do you guys know at all who Shooter Jennings is? Some of you guys know who he is. So he was a guy I met in 2001. I didn't know he was Waylon Jennings' kid at first. He had this band called Stargun. They just moved to LA from Nashville. And they opened for Loaded, 3 shows. And Shooter was this, like, I've noticed ever since I was like 15 years old, there's out of every 10 musicians I'll meet, there'll be one that I'm like, that guy or girl, that's a lifer. They're going to stay in it for... Nothing's going to sway them out of this thing. And I identified Shooter as one of those back in 2001. Shooter then went on to have he has a very successful kind of outlaw country career, but he also, like right now, he's writing Marilyn Manson's new record. He's kind of all over the place, this guy. He just won a Grammy for producing Brandon Carlisle's wonderful record. He develops video games. This guy does like horror movies, and he's kind of all over the place, this guy. And he's super cool. And I had this group of songs. My manager, Brian, here got the songs to Shooter. And Shooter knows my history, knows my Johnny Thunders thing, knows my Mark Lanigan connection. And he was really excited to the idea of producing the record. And we used his band, which, you know, gives it this whole other musical taste. If it was just Shooter and I, me acoustic guitar, him on piano, would have had that still a bare thing, but the added pedal steel and Jesse Dayton playing guitar and John playing guitar, and Jonathan Wilson, if you know who he is, he plays with Roger Waters. Play guitar on it, like all these really incredible fucking players. Got my brother in his horn section who played on Guns N' Roses stuff, moved to the city and Live and Let Die, and yeah, I got them in to play on the last song, the hopeful last song, and but Shooter really, without him, this musical journey that I went on that I was hoping would be the culmination would be what this record sounds like. He really made that happen for me.
What do you think it is about him that's that marks him out as unique to any other musician that you've worked with throughout your career?
Well, I've worked with producers. You know, Guns N' Roses, when we did Appetite and Use Your Illusions, we had this guy Mike Klink, and we had looked for producers originally for Appetite, and we didn't know how to look for a producer, really. You know, it's like we had the songs, we had our amps, we knew what we sounded like, right? And we had a couple guys come in, but we got to change the drums around, and we're like, nope, everything's perfect. And Mike Klink was a guy who came in and said, I just want to mic your guys' amps up and get the drums. Didn't talk about arrangements or anything. I just want to get that sound through a microphone, through a cord, onto tape, so it sounds exactly like you. We're like, oh, you're fucking hired. And right?
That's an easy job interview.
But he would have us, like, you know, when he came on with the headphones, like we were fucking around, you know, which we didn't really do much of. Probably much to people's surprise. We were very serious when it came to music. But, you know, we got in, we were like, the Appetite, like, oh, you mean you can, like, Slash was like, I can do my guitars later. We're just getting bass and drums right now, so I can play anything I want and drink as much as I want. You can, but so the outtakes of some of that, where it's just bass and drums, is probably pretty amazing, because I remember seeing Slash on the floor, just like laughing his head off, playing, just shredding through the whole song. Like, dude, you're not helping us. But Mike Klink would say, okay, you come on the headphones. Okay, guys, fucking dig in. This is the one. So, and when you'd hear him come on, you're like, okay, fuck, we better get our shit together. So, and he did that. He was, but as far as producing, like, arrangements and having ideas for other instruments, Mike didn't. We were such a fully realized thing that I think that wouldn't have worked with us. Even Velvet Revolver, we were pretty fully realized. All the songs were done. We didn't need an actual producer. Loaded Records, again, same sort of thing. Walking Papers, anything I've kind of done. But Shooter was the first guy that's kind of like what you would imagine Phil Spector to be, like in the 60s, without the guns and the cocaine. But he was a real, like, he would conduct the band. He would talk to them about each of their parts and talk, you know, how loudly or softly to play it. When the Waters singing group, this gospel singing group, came in, all of a sudden he was this Southern gentleman that I'd never seen, talking to these elderly African-American people out of this Southern respect. It was really so cool to see. And he got the best out of me vocally, and we didn't use like expensive vocal mics with tubes or anything. We used an SM7, which you can use on drums and stuff, as my vocal mic. He wanted like this pure raw vocal, and so just to watch him produce this record, he actually produced it, didn't just record it, and it helped me realize the songs. We arranged the songs together, and yeah.
To revisit your the fascination with history that you spoke about,
Yeah.
and how much of a reader you are. Where did you develop that?
Can I just get real with you for a second?
Go for it.
Do I got any white shit around my mouth? Because I just chewed a
Looking
mint.
good.
Is it all right?
Looking
I'm
good.
all paranoid that I got like white shit around my lips.
Or we could.
That's
we
the
could-
jet
yeah.
lag kicking in right now. Sorry. History, yes?
Yeah, fascination with history. Where did that develop? Because I mean, at least sort of when you were younger, what I'm led to believe is that you weren't exactly, school wasn't exactly your priority.
Nope.
So where did that kind of fascination develop for you?
School wasn't a priority when I was a teenager, no, because I was touring in punk rock bands. But I knew I would come back to. I didn't dislike some subjects. I didn't dislike school. I didn't dislike the idea of furthering my knowledge. I knew I was not super rounded, but I wanted to go find out the world myself through punk rock tours, and that was a really good education. I'm glad. In my case, I did that instead of high school. I did some of high school, but then I got this thing they call it GED, Graduation Equivalency Diploma, when I was 18, which you can do in the States. You take a test, and I passed it. And so I got sober when I was 30. Something happened to me, and I ended up in the hospital. And so I was faced with this reality: you can't drink or do drugs again, because I had an organ issue. You'll die. So, so you either do that and die, or you stay sober and you have a good chance of getting through this. They had a rehab. I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. They had a rehab set up for me to go to, but after that 2 weeks, after like being actually sober, off the booze, off the cocaine, I was on plenty of morphine and Librium and stuff for withdrawal, but they took that away from me as well. And when I was done with that, I saw this light, and I didn't look back, man. And I dove into all the things I'd missed in my 20s. I mean, I didn't see a movie from 1984 to 1994.
That's a lot of cinema to catch up on.
So, what I first got was, I mean, there was a lot of movies between 1984 and 94. But that gives you an idea. Like I rented this series. It was Ken Burns' Civil War, right? And I had to stay sober, right? So I'm like, I fell into this martial arts sensei, and I was just riding my mountain bike at first, just to get the shakes from stop shaking. So I'd ride for like 8 hours a day. I entered a race, like a mountain bike race. Well, if I can make that, that's 4 weeks away. That'll be 4 weeks sober. And I entered the race, and I get up there with like cutoff shorts and high tops, and everybody else has like, the riding shoes and helmets and jerseys and shit. And but I finished the race, and I got into this martial arts, Yukido-kan, which really like changed my whole way of thinking. I dove in, and I was in the dojo twice a day, riding my mountain bikes, and then I would get home. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have anything. Guns N' Roses was kind of like at the end of Illusions. I got done with the Believe Me tour. So I just started reading. And that Ken Burns' Civil War got me started. I read like, I don't know, 12 books on the Civil War from every different angle. And then I just started going down all these different rabbit holes, man, from super nerdy shit, like polar exploration, mountaineering. Then I got into the history of China, and Roman history.
That was a brief read.
Brief read, right? Then you get into the history of Japan. So then you got to go, I got Roman history and then European history. And I told you guys, I read there's a book. I don't know who wrote it. The book, it's just called London. Do you know the book I'm talking about? It's like 2,000 pages long. Yeah. It's a dense read, but it's fascinating. So when I come to London, like the historical stuff, I tell you the nerdy touristy shit I do is not really like, I love the Tower of London, don't get me wrong. Buckingham Palace is great. But I'm more interested in the shit they found at Canary Wharf from the Roman Empire. And I'm more interested in like, the Welsh language. Those are the English people that got pushed all the way over there when the Romans came, And you look at the Welsh language, and then you hear that original language, which is like I don't know if you guys know some of that. Like the words sound like what they are. Like the word for rock is like, And so I thought somebody's taking the piss out of me in Wales for a microwave. They said there's a puppety ping. And I thought they were taking the piss. And that's actually the word for microwave in Welsh. No bullshit. And I went to a woman in a store because I thought the guy was taking the piss. So I went to a grocery store. We were in Wales. And I said, excuse me, miss, what do you call this thing right here? And she said, it's a poppity pig. So they, it's interesting that the original language here, it was like, wow, the words are things that sound like what they are. It's super fascinating to me. It's really nerdy, I know, probably. But it does inform me, and I love it. And it's, for me, it's better than doing drugs and alcohol for sure. And become this world-class tourist. And my wife is super into it. She does like, we got to go to like, for Milan, it's all about fashion. And there's a lot of fashion I have to see as well. Now I'm into fashion history. I do know a lot about it, fashion history, But I'll go into, why Milan became a fashion capital is because after World War II, they took the bomb factories in Milan and turned them into clothing factories because there was good. Do you know this?
I don't, but this is super nerdy.
Super nerdy. But
I think this is what everyone that came here was expecting the history.
What's the war
Milan
part
fashion.
of what's the war part of fashion history? I need to know the war part. But we can talk about rock and roll if you guys want to. It's cool. I'm sure. I was thinking about this Kerrang thing, and you guys are young and stuff, and you're like, you don't want to see some fucking guy come and talk about history and heavy topics. But I do hope the record will resonate with all of us. And I have this really lofty place where I put rock and rollers, and I think rock and rollers. If everybody on this planet was a fucking rock, like people like you, we'd be fucking A-okay, I do. I really.
I want to revisit your punk roots that you spoke about, your education in punk. What was it about punk rock that spoke to you as a young man?
Well, I'm the last 8 kids. So when you have that many kids, you want something of your own. And when I started seeing the flyers on the telephone poles in my city for like bands like The Lewd and DOA and shit, it was scary. I was about 11 or 12 probably. But I knew at least, and then I met a guy at a pink mohawk. And he walked down the street, and I was playing by then. And he had this voice. His name was Chris Crass. I'm Chris Crass. I'm like, okay, you want to join my band? You play something? I'm like, yeah, I can play drums or bass. So I go, okay, join my band. And we had this band called The Veins, and I wrote my first song. I was 14. It was called The Fake. I was 13 because I was still in middle school. And The Fake was about a girl in my middle school. She was super fake, man. So stupid, but through hanging out with these older kids, right? Like they were like 8. Somebody was 18 to me at 14 was old, Somebody was in their 20s, like ancient. But one of my first gigs was opening for Black Flag, and singing that real immense fucking gnarly southern. That was Ron Reyes was the singer, the guy that's on Decline of Western Civilization. So this is 2 singers before Rollins. And getting this fucking education through and hearing the British bands like the Clash. I mean, I didn't know British politics. I didn't know about God Save the Queen. Okay, I don't know what that means really. But you got this education, and my mom, I was listening to Stiff Little Fingers in our home stereo, and my mom were descendants. Her father came from Ireland, from Cork, right? So she was still connected to Ireland and through the Troubles and all of that stuff. And the Stiff Little Fingers is playing at my house, and comes in after work, and she's like, "What are you listening to?" I'm like, "This band. I just got the record." She hears the song like "Suspect Device," and "Bloody Sunday." And she comes and looks at the album cover and sees they're from Northern Ireland, and she starts crying, and she's these poor boys, what they're going through. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm pogoing right now, But she educated me like these kids are singing about something real in their lives right now, which we weren't dealing with in Seattle at all, right? And it just woke me up politically and stuff to other things that were going on and Bad Brains, you know, going into like the reggae. I saw fucking Bad Brains and Angelic Upstarts together in Seattle, and I got to jam with the Upstarts, and it just taught me a lot about the world. I think I got out of just Seattle with punk rock and got to explore the world in my living room. Yeah.
For a man that likes history, I've got a little piece of history here
Go.
that I want to share with you.
Go ahead. Oh, you want to share? I thought you were going to ask me a question.
I want to show you this. So this is the first time you ever featured on the front cover of Kerrang.
That's the first time we were ever on a cover of anything.
June 1987. We dug this out the archive today.
Yeah.
What memories does that bring back looking at that?
That's at the recording studio that we did Appetite on just the rug. It was on the floor. We were pretty surprised. We released an EP before Appetite, and we got there was no internet then, believe it or not. It was not even cell phones. So, but I guess we were getting traction in the UK with the EP we put out. I had Reckless Life and Nice Boys and all, and so we're making Appetite, and they say Matt Kerrang wants to send an interviewer over, and they want to take some photos of you guys, maybe for the cover. We're like, what the fuck, you know? I mean, we were drawing in LA at that point, drawing people. But outside of that, you know, and so that was, let me see this photo. I mean, that's really, that's just us. And that's not dressing up for a photo shoot, you know? That was us at the studio that day, probably getting ready to track, or we just got done tracking. So, I'd hate to read the interview now. If I'm in it, I probably sound like a fucking idiot. But
how has it been to reconnect with the Guns guys over the past few years?
I mean, it's just been the best thing about it is that we did reconnect, and in a very deep way, and a very solid way, very righteous and cool, and talked about things, and we discovered we're now fucking grown ass men. And can be honest with each other, and that's been, I think for all of us, like it's been that thing that's been hanging there, that you get asked about in every interview you do, you know, since then, and now we finally were able to like really communicate and figure shit out, and now it's almost funny, like, you know, we'll talk about a story and like, well, I thought it went down like this. You know, this is something that happened like 25 years ago. Well, no, I thought it, you know, you have 3 different opinions and you're all wrong, of course, you know. But, you know, you've been mad about it ever since. But it's been, I don't know what the word is. It just, I mean, it gave me like the intellectual and spiritual sobriety to be able to go out in the world this time around and observe what else is going on and have empathy and see these crowds. The crowds that came, man, I met some really cool fans, you know, that made me realize we all think, you know, you get in an elevator or something, like you're the most interesting person in that elevator, you know? I'm the most interesting motherfucker in this room. And it's just when you start thinking you're the most interesting motherfucker in the room, it's that guy who's got his little girl out in front, and they've come to 7 straight shows. Why is that? And they cry during Sweet Child of Mine. Just a guy and his little girl. They're standing at the same place, and I'm a sucker with kids in the front row. They'll get everything I have, wristbands and picks, and especially little girls, because I have 2 of those. And but I was in New Orleans one day with my wife. We were doing a nerdy fucking thing. We were gonna go on the stage, with the horses and do the tour of the city with the guy talking to you. Oh, yeah. And we saw the guy and his daughter, and she had 9 of my wristbands all the way up her arm, and she's 9 years old, right? And the dad, and I'm like, I've seen you guys at the last 7 shows, like at the same place, and what goes on with that? You know, what are you guys doing? You and your little, I mean, it's fucking awesome. You and your little, and it, not to bring it down again, but he said her mom died, and I didn't know what to do with her. You know, I don't know how to deal with it. So we just started going. It was their favorite song, them as a family, Sweet Child of Mine, and I saw them crying. And you know, it's just I guess when you think you're the most interesting person in the room, you meet people who come to your shows who their story is so deep and so sometimes beautiful and sometimes heavy like that, and that has really that kind of joining in with the audience. Like every show is a celebration, man, and it's just it's made me want to do something beyond that, and that this record is a result of that.
Where do you feel that connection might go with the guys?
Oh, that question.
That question.
I was waiting for that question.
You're on camera now, so you can't dodge it.
I could. I can dodge. Yeah. If things are really positive, here's what I'll say, in all honesty, without trying to skirt anything. Things are very positive in the band right now. Communication is at very high level. And in classic Guns N' Roses fashion, I won't tell you shit. Yeah.
You could dodge that question, and you did. Well done.
No.
Like, I thought we really had you cornered.
You
Quite
had
literally
me cornered,
in a room full of people. But Duff, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, no problem.
Round of applause.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
And good luck with the new record. And
Cheers.
you'll be back in August, I think.
Yeah, I
to come
played,
back.
I think, down the street from here, right?
Yeah.
Islington?
Yes.
Come on out, you guys. Yeah.
Thanks again, Duff.
Cool.
Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Thanks so much.